All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Graduate Certificates in Writing, Editing, and Publishing Showcase. I'm Lucas from the Domestic Recruitment Team at UTS. Before we start the session, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands our City Broadway campus now stands. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. As we allow more attendees to join us online, I'm going to run through a couple of tips for you to enhance your experience for this webinar. Participants' cameras and microphones have been muted to maximize the webinar experience, and please feel free to ask us any question throughout the session via the Q&A function at the bottom of your toolbar. We have dedicated some time for our Q&A session at the end. Please also note, we have started recording for this webinar for educational purposes, and we'll also redistribute this recording to those registered for this session. Thank you very much. All right, welcome to those who just joined us today for the Graduate Certificates in Writing, Editing, and Publishing Showcase. My name is Lucas from the Domestic Recruitment Team at UTS. In this session, you will join industry experts for insights and career opportunities, be inspired by alumni success stories, discover exciting project opportunities with experts. You will also learn about flexible program options, as well as get answers from our guest speakers as well. To kick us start with this session, I'm pleased to introduce our guests for today. I would like to welcome Delia, a senior lecturer in writing, editing, and publishing. She's a distinguished author with works in both fictions and non-fiction genres, including novels and thought-provoking essays. Delia has also contributed significantly to the literary industry as a judge and peer advisor for several prestigious awards, including the Age Book of the Year, the Stella Prize, and the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards. Please also meet Andrew, a lecturer in writing, editing, and publishing. He is a renowned writer of fiction and narrative nonfiction, with his novel Lucky's shortlisted for the 2021 Miles Franklin Literary Awards. He holds a doctorate in creative arts from UTS and have also been a valuable educator in both undergraduate and postgraduate programs. Andrew's work have been featured in a lot of different publications, and he has been a speaker in major literary events and conferences, including those in the Sydney Writers' Festival and the Adelaide Festival. We also have David. He has worked in Australian trade publishing for his entire adult life, from reception to design to publishing. Was co-founder of CEJA, the Viva la Novella Prize, and is publisher and director of the Brio books. I'd also like to introduce Amanda. So Amanda was over 7 years of experience in business strategy and project management. Amanda is currently served as the co-founder and product manager at Perpetual Hire. Additionally, she's one of our current students in the UTS Writing, Editing, and Publishing program. With our introduction has just completed, let's dive into the exciting world of writing, editing, and publishing. All right, welcome everyone and welcome to the panel. I would like to introduce you guys, of course, but let's just get you guys to introduce yourself first. Delia, how are you?
Oh, hello, my name's Delia Faulkner, as you've probably worked out. I am a senior lecturer in the creative writing program, and I teach into the non-fiction stream particularly, but I'm an author of both fiction and non-fiction, 4 books, 2 fiction and 2 non-fiction.
Nice to meet you, Delia. We also have Andrew on the call here. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, thank you, Lucas. You did a very good job introducing me earlier. I'm Andrew Pepos. I'm a lecturer in creative writing at UTS. My novel Lucky was published in 2020. It was a book that I wrote while I undertook a PhD in creative writing at UTS. So UTS has been very important to my writing career. I'm hard at work on my next book, which I'll deliver next year to my publisher. And I teach both nonfiction and fiction in undergraduate and postgraduate suite of degrees at UTS.
All right, perfect. We look forward to your new book, Andrew. We also have David here. Hello, David.
Hi. I think you said everything about me. Thanks, Lucas. But yeah, I've been working in publishing nearly 30 years now. I basically fell into it from reception, which you can't really do these days. There's a lot more competition. And I've been working with UTS for, I think, 12 years now on the annual anthology. So working with students to put a collection of nonfiction and fiction and poetry and scripts together every year.
Perfect. Hello, Amanda.
Hey, yeah, so I mean, yeah, you pretty much covered it all, but I also did my undergrad at UTS. I graduated 9 years ago. It was in event management. Didn't work a day in that specific field, and definitely didn't expect to come back and study writing or be at uni at all. But it's definitely one of the best decisions I've made in a while. So.
All right, welcome back. Andrew and Delia, I have a question for you guys to kick us off. Can you tell us a little bit about what Graduate Certificate of Writing, Editing, and Publishing, and what this program is for, who this program is for as well?
Yes, well, the graduate certificates just had a redesign, and we've consulted extensively with industry to make sure that we are as up to date as possible with this degree. And so the degree is for people who are passionate about writing and who would like to, delve deeper into everything from the psychology of creativity to new trends in narrative storytelling to shifts in genre, because I suppose the thing that I would most like to say at the moment is that publishing is changing very rapidly, and that is from the perspective of whether you are a writer or whether you are someone who would like to get into the writing or publishing industry, or in fact set your own path and perhaps do something entrepreneurial. The old borders between different jobs and different genres are moving quite swiftly, and so we have conceived of this degree for people who both want to be more effective writers and for people who are interested in working in the industry, publishing industry or adjacent industries.
Right, perfect. Andrew, do you have anything to add or good?
I think Delia's done just a wonderful job designing this degree this year in consultation with industry. I think the graduate certificate is ideal for people who want to take that step and devote some time to their writing, to get serious about their writing, to learn some narrative techniques that will help them with the project they have in mind. Or they may want to develop their editing and writing skills, learn about publishing skills, and perhaps think about changing careers. The degree is helpful to a range of people, I think, and it's been designed with that in mind.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Thank you very much. David, you are in the industry right now. You're working hard in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's the most significant trends and transformation to what is happening to our current writing, editing, and publishing industry in Australia?
I'll do my best. It's kind of a big question. There's a lot of scope to it. Basically, what people are consuming is changing a lot, and why they're consuming it. So how they're being influenced, how they choose which writers to follow. So back when I started, we would publish a book, we'd put it in a bookstore, and then roll the dice, and it would generally work out. But now the internet is here, and there's social media, TikTok, and everything like that. So it's really good to be across everything. And I hate to say it, if you can somehow tap into the zeitgeist or just be a part of the zeitgeist if you're young, which is good. When you're older, you have to pretend, but when you're young, you can be a part of it. And so UTS and all the programs we do, they help you get across it. They help you get across everything, because there is the skills you have to pick up. If you're going to be an editor, then you need an eye for detail. You need to learn exactly where to put everything. You need the Australian style guide and to be able to do it real quick. But then you're also going to need to know how to communicate online, how to publish a blog, how to work with different back-end systems and that kind of thing, because a lot of it then becomes about data flow, how you push data into TikTok and all these different things and how you connect it. So there's a lot of different areas to publishing. So it's not just writing and creativity. There's then sales and data and putting it all together. But in saying that, it's one of those industries where the more you know about everything, the more you can do and the more you can move around.
Yeah, sounds like a fair play. What about like how do we shape what students already learn, the knowledge, the skills, and then like how can we kind of like shape it into those looking for the job in these area then?
Well, it depends. There's sort of, say there's like three main ways to get into publishing. And so editing is one way, and you can go in as a junior editor. And the best way to do that is to study editing and get experience editing actual live projects. The more experience you have, the better you'll be, and the more you can communicate. If you're quite a sociable person, then you can go the publicity route. And that's where you're actually starting talking about books which already exist and promoting and taking authors around and out and about. Or if you've got a little bit of gift of the gab, then sales is the other way, which is a great way, because you may be quite a persuasive person and actually, but I do like books, and there is actually a product which you can believe in. You can go around and start selling the books and stuff like that. So those are the sort of the main entry points into publishing. I mean, I did go in reception, and yeah, that is still an option, but it's not one to rely on. So I would aim at refining those skills. But once you're in, you can sort of move between those areas. Yeah,
fair enough. Thank you. Amanda, you as the current student right now, how's your experience so far? And like, what is the most enjoyable stuff that you enjoy within this course?
Yeah, so the experience has been incredible. I think when people outside of uni ask me that question, they quickly regret having asked the question, because I just tend to waffle on about it. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge from the first week. The first week's supposed to be sort of calm and getting to know everyone in your class and stuff, but it was a bit of a humbling shock. I think going into writing or going into the course, I was more of an intuitive writer. I hadn't had any training prior. And so I remember actually in Andrew's class, we had to do a reflection on what our strengths and weaknesses were. And I didn't even know how to answer the question. So that was a bit frightening. But it was really good. Obviously, throughout the year, I've learned what those are. In terms of what my favorite thing is about the course, it's kind of hard to pick, but probably just being surrounded by people who are so into writing. And, with that said, we do what's called workshopping. So this was an unfamiliar concept to me coming into the course, but for anyone who doesn't know, essentially you just, for your assessments, your creative writing assessments, you submit your work to the class, everyone reads it, and then we sit around a big table and we give each other feedback. So, that's intimate and intimidating, but it is really beneficial, not just because you get feedback from your peers, but also because you have to give feedback. So what that process taught me was how to read and analyze, dissect a piece of writing. And what I noticed, at least, where I'm at right now, is a lot of it has to do with kind of paying attention to that gut feeling that you have as you're reading, and then trying to articulate or figure out, okay, why did that stick out to me? Because you need to be able to articulate that to give proper feedback for someone. So yeah, it's been a great experience.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. Thank you. Andrew, since you are one of the teacher that taught like Amanda, can you share a little bit of like diverse careers opportunities or various trajectories for writing, editing, and publishing graduates? Like, we'll just brainstorm ahead.
Sure. So if we look at the undergraduate degree in writing and publishing, the majority of those students have gone on to employment in either media or publishing industries or public service or tourism or corporate writing jobs. So that's the data we have for the undergrad. In the postgraduate suite of degrees, it's a bit of a more complex data set. Students tend to already have some employment history, and they may want to career change, or they may want to maintain their job while they write their book or screenplay. So it's true that writing careers can mean a suitable working a suitable job while writing your book or writing your screenplay. So I know and have taught postgraduate students who have found work in publishing houses. The marketing expert at my publisher, Pan Macmillan, right now, so someone I work with, is a former UTS student, a former student of mine. So there are opportunities in publishing, in publicity and marketing, and in editing and sales, as David has mentioned. All the major English language publishing houses have operations in Australia, the four largest being Penguin Random House, Pan Macmillan, Hachette, HarperCollins. Then you have a number of mid-sized publishers, which are nevertheless significant, like Bloomsbury and Allen and Unwin. So, and also many small publishers do very well here in Australia too. I know graduates who have started small presses. I know a number who have gone into journalism, which is also a competitive industry. And some UTS postgrad writing graduates have work in arts administration or as event organizers. I can think of one student who is a programmer of writers' festivals, for example. And, you know, a significant number of novelists have studied postgrad at UTS, novelists who have won, for example, the Miles Franklin. And every year there are 2 or 3 novels published in Australia that students began in the UTS postgraduate degrees. So those are some of the graduate outcomes that I can speak to.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Delia, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say that we love hearing from those students too. One of the great things about this course is the people and the continuing relationships that people make here and then, take into the world and bring back. And so, it's one of the great delights in my working life to, receive those emails from students saying that they have just started their own small press, or they have just, they've got a new book out and so on. So they do become part of the sort of creative writing family in various ways.
Yeah, it sounds good. And like from my understanding is that this program is also co-designed with industry partners. So David, what kind of stuff enable our students to have a more practical learning experience, and how do you find our program from an industry perspective at the moment?
Cool. I just want to add to the previous question as well, because what I've found, because I have worked across other industries, not just in publishing, and what people who enter publishing and study editing and stuff get that other industries don't is a lot of project management experience and a lot of long-term project management experience, which you can take into public service and finance and anything you want if you want to move on that way. And publishing really builds those skills, which I guess is a nice segue to the second question. So I've been doing it for I think 12 years, or I'm coming up to my 12th year of working with UTS. So I enjoy the industry experience because I get to meet a new crop of really keen and eager students every year. And the best thing you can do is get experience doing projects. Because if you ever get an interview for a publishing job or anything like that, the worst thing is to be all starry-eyed and not know what you're talking about. So the more you can do projects and learn about the realities of the industry and what people are going through and the changes, and that's what UTS's program helps fill that gap, which it's really hard to get that experience anywhere else. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, perfect.
Feel free to follow up.
Yeah, well, expanding onto this discussion, I would also like to bring us to Delia and Andrew to talk about how the UTS programs actually meet the industry needs, and then to also set students up for success. So I'll pass the time to you guys.
Thank you. I will take us through some of the slides that we've prepared for you. So look, again, in the new formation of the industry, which is continually, it's experiencing a lot of change at the moment. The flexibility is key, and the ability to, as David said, to manage projects, but to be self-motivated, to look for opportunities for leadership is part of the, and work well with people. These are all very important aspects of publishing and of writing. And so we have formalized those skills a little bit more in this degree as we've fine-tuned it in conversation with industry. So if you study this degree, you would be learning versatile skills for a wide-ranging career. So you would be, I'll come to the subjects in a little bit more detail later, but you'll be simulating some publishing and editing processes. You will be learning about not only how to write and how to write in genres that are perhaps not, some will be familiar and some not. You will also be learning to read deeply and well, and to discuss writing with other people, which for as professional writers, that's something that is a big part of our careers, what we do in our lives anyway. You'll be learning from a specialist team. So creative writing has been running in various forms at UTS for about over 40 years. So we're one of the oldest programs and departments in the country. And all of us, I'll take you through the staff in a moment in another slide, but all of us are professional, practicing, award-winning writers who are deeply, and industry people who are deeply involved in industry and volunteer a lot of our time, as you would have heard in the introductions, to things like peer assessing for Creative Australia, mentoring other writers, taking part in literary festivals, occasionally helping with the programming of literary festivals and so on. And so we are very, we have a very strong reputation that we are very, very proud of in this department. We also are able to help students find publishing opportunities. We have great links to industry, and thank you, David, for coming along. David has been helping with the production of producing the UTS Writers Anthology, which is led by student volunteers, as he said, for about the last 12 years, and that is a showcase of our students' work that is edited by students and produced by students, and contains the work of students that goes out into the world, and it is nationally reviewed. It showcases, it's something that publishers do and agents do keep an eye on. And so we also have a great record of encouraging students through authentic assessment, because the assessment that we offer is the things that students have to complete in class are very similar to the sorts of things they could place instantly in industry. We have a great record just in the creative nonfiction subject that's been running for some years, of having something like, I think we've had about 32 student publications in major literary journals, and one of our creative writing students, as creative nonfiction students, has just won a national, the major national award for essays. And we are also, one of the other things we've done in reworking retweaking this degree is to work a little bit harder on the will-orientated learning, which simulates industry skills. So we have one intern-like subject, which I'll speak about later, where students are actually practicing the kinds of skills with industry advice that they would be using out in industry. So we're really making that link between the industry world and the writing program and editing and publishing program. It's a very strong link, and we've strengthened it with this degree. Could we see the next slide, please, Lucas? Okay, so the way that the subject looks now is that it is, there are 4 subjects in total. 2 are writing subjects and 2 are publishing and editing subjects. So we have professional editing practice, which is not only, students are not only learning the most up-to-date editing practices and technologies, but there is also an emphasis in this subject, as it's been reworked, on the kind of team building and cultural skills that are increasingly required in the work of editing, but in the writing world generally. So we take those cultural competencies very seriously at UTS. The narrative and creative practices subject, which also runs in the autumn semester, is a subject that will look at the psychology of creativity and look at narrative writing across a range of platforms. So we delve deeply into samples of fabulous writing, and students will also write and workshop their own work and learn about practices in storytelling, from Indigenous storytelling to storytelling adaptation across different platforms. In spring, we have 2 subjects to offer. Publishing workshop is our exciting, will-orientated subject where students will receive advice from an industry brief, and then they will work in small groups to simulate many of the processes that they would be undertaking and publishing, and then they brief. From writing a SWOT report to looking at data to thinking about the publicity for a book, and then they report to an industry partner at the end of the subject. So we're very excited about that one. And then in creative non-fiction workshop, we are looking at a broad range of non-fiction and non-fiction practices, but we are also looking at the way that non-fiction writing is changing, is becoming a booming industry, but a booming practice, but is also that there are many weird and wonderful permutations of creative non-fiction now, where that line between fiction and non-fiction and truth and invention is becoming increasingly complicated. And whether you are publishing or whether you are writing and workshopping beautiful pieces of creative non-fiction in this subject, it's something that you really need to know if you're going to be writing or working in the industry. Could we see the next slide, please, Lucas? I'm very sorry for the garbage truck that just, of course, chose to come down my street at this precise moment. So what can you expect from these courses? Well, as I said, you'd be looking at engaging in diverse and authentic learning activities that are going to simulate, you'll be writing work that simulates the kind of work that you can actually hopefully just go out and try and place in the marketplace, and editing and publishing practices. You will be gaining practical experience in publishing and current editorial practice, including the latest practices around copy editing, but also the important contextual knowledge around those hard skills around matters like sustainability and cultural competency, the kind of sensitivities that we increasingly need to bring to our work as editors or publishers, but also increasingly to our work as writers. You'll receive both theoretical and practical advice, guidance from academic staff who are all leaders in industry. You'll learn a wide range of narrative techniques for fiction and non-fiction, and when you come out of your degree, you'll have a beautiful portfolio of authentic work that's ready for submission. You'll develop essential skills in collaboration with industry professionals. So you have industry professionals working in the department, but we're also strengthening our links with industry that will help you, again, to gain that really essential flexibility, even if that is if you end up doing entrepreneurial work as well, which is increasingly something I think that we need to think about, that's going to equip you for the blurred roles across industry. You'll develop an understanding of opportunities for leadership and entrepreneurial work. You'll deepen your understanding of creativity and the psychology of creativity and the creative process. So a lot of our writing classes actually involve not only workshopping work that you have in hand, but giving students, we have a lot of fun giving students a lot of exercises that become a kind of a repository for them of go-to techniques for when the well is feeling a little bit dry or they want to try some new technique. We try those out in classes, which is one of my favorite things to do as an academic. And finally, you're going to be building professional relationships and applying key skills across different narrative genres and platforms, but also learning to work flexibly with other people. And many of our students carry those relationships that they've built in their degrees out into all sorts of professional practice, as Andrew has outlined. So could we move to the next slide, please, Lucas? Okay, so here are our 4 subjects. I've already told you about them, so I won't go into great detail, but we have the Creative Nonfiction Workshop, where students are learning to read deeply and to understand the global context of creative nonfiction and the different nonfiction, very broad, very booming nonfiction markets, and the ways that they blur interestingly around the edges, and lots of exciting new things happening in that particular space that students would need to know about, in editing, in writing, in publishing. Narrative and creative practices, where students are going to explore storytelling in various traditions and genres, and to delve into theories and techniques of narrative that are going to help their develop creative analysis, which again one often needs even in talking about one's own work in public forums, and to develop their narrative skills across changing platforms and technologies. Professional editing practice. Again, this subject is it has been very solid and very good, well-performing subject in our graduate certificate, and we've again just fine-tuned it a little bit to incorporate some of those skills of cultural competency and teamwork that are also required in the editorial process, and again in a job market where positions and the old jobs are a little bit more flexible. So even someone who's going to work and become a publicist in a publishing company these days actually probably needs to be able to, write quite, it doesn't hurt to write quite well. And one of the pieces of feedback that we had from industry was that it's the all-rounders, it's people who can bring a whole set of different skills to the table and who are flexible, who tend to do very well in industry these days. Publishing workshop, as I said, that is our will-orientated subject that simulates the practical processes of publishing for students to present to an industry partner. Next slide, please. Okay, apart from the actual degree and the structure that we've just told you about, we have some other things that we think are particularly great about our program, and one that we're very proud of is the UTS Writers Anthology. If you're interested in the history of that anthology, you can go to the UTS pages. There's a piece there's a piece that I've written about that 40-year history, and it's a very exciting magazine, because you can go back into that history and you can see people like, one of our great writers, the late Gillian Mears, getting their early start in this journal. And this is just a sample of some of the very beautiful covers, going all the way back to Pink Cakes, which was the very first UTS Writers Anthology there, down in the bottom right corner. And that is something that, where students apply. It's very competitive, and it's a great calling card in industry if you have been an editor. And so students apply to edit the anthology. They do all aspects of work within the anthology. They work with the students on their students who've submitted their work. They choose that work. They work out a theme for the anthology. They work out an order for the anthology, and then they run the events launching the anthology as well. So it's something, again, that we are very proud of in this program. Next slide, please. Okay, another thing that we have been running for some time is the Copyright Agency UTS Writer in Residence program. So we are waiting to determine our funding for the current for 2024. It has been we have been regularly funded, so we are very hopeful that this program will continue. The Copyright Agency pays for a writer who is working on the notoriously hard second or third book to come and be in residence, have an office at UTS, to consult with students by appointment on their work, to give guest lectures into classes. We often study the books that they are working on, and so our last 4 residents were going backwards from 2022, Nadi Simpson, who's a Yuwalarai storyteller and songwriter, Christopher Raja, who was a writing about a book about set in the Northern Territory, who was an award-nominated novelist, memoirist, and playwright. Bree Lee, she wrote her book Who Gets to Be Smart during her residency in 2020, and she is an author, a journalist, and an activist. And Christine Piper, who is one of our old students from UTS as well, who won the 2014 Australian Vogel Literary Award, which is the national prize for best novel by a writer under 35, back in 2014. And Christine was working on her second novel, and spoke very, that person gives a public facing lecture at the end of their time at UTS, as well as giving lectures. And I remember some of Christine's lectures on writing method were very, and creativity were very, very exciting to the students. And Nadi Simpson, we studied, she was writing her second novel, but we studied, one of the highlights of the year was studying her essay Gifts Across Space and Time, and her visits into class to speak about that essay. So could we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so again, one of the things that distinguishes UTS, we believe, from within the creative writing programs, is the very high caliber of our staff, all of whom are working in all sorts of different ways professionally within industry. So you have been introduced to myself and to Andrew, but we also have on staff Professor Tony Macris, who's the author of 3 works of fiction and non-fiction. Tony was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for his non-fiction book a few years ago, and the Prime Minister's Literary Awards. And Tony is often teaches into the narrative subjects around narrative and narrative theory. Sarah Atfield is a widely published poet. She's the co-editor of Creative Writing Practice, Reflections on Form and Process, which is a book about creative writing that most of the staff at UTS and other writers have contributed to. So that's a textbook on writing, which might interest some of you. Dr. Claire Corbett has a specialty in speculative fiction, and she's the author of When We Had Wings and Watch Over Me. She's a board member of Varuna, the Writers' House, which is a fabulous writers' retreat and much, much more these days up in Katoomba. It's the old house of the late writer Eleanor Dark that was gifted to the people of New South Wales, and runs all sorts of interesting residencies and programs. And Claire is on the board of Varuna, and she's also the fiction editor of Overland, which is one of our major literary magazines. And finally, Graham Akhurst is a Fulbright Scholar, 2021, a Kukumini author of a young adult novel, Borderland, which I had the pleasure of helping him launch in Sydney, which is a very interesting, very exciting read, which is a mix of sort of coming of age novel and coming into cultural power novel mixed with Gothic horror, and it's quite fantastic. So that's Graham. Could we move to the next slide, please? And here are just a few of the recent, as Andrew said, we generally hear from a few, apart from all the writers who are, getting great jobs elsewhere and, are publishing short pieces. We often, it's a great joy to hear from students who have recently published books. So 3 of the books that have recently come out of our creative writing program are Brendan Atkins' non-fiction work, The Naturalist, which tells the life of Alan Riverston McCulloch, who was a very colourful curator at the Australian Museum. Nadine J. Cohen's book, which is fabulous, Everyone and Everything, has also just been recently released, and I remember very fondly speaking with Nadine about her very early ideas for setting a novel at the Macliver Women's Baths in Sydney. And, this is the lovely part of the end of that conversation when you see the book out and receiving great reviews. Sydney Koo has their book, The Spider and Her Demons, also, I think, doing very well in the shops at the moment, which is a young adult novel. And very excitingly, earlier this year, Tracy Ellis, who began that essay as a student at UTS, has won the over 800 in a field of about 800 people internationally and nationally, has won the 2023 Calibre Essay Prize for her essay Flow States. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes, so Lucas is going to talk us through the sort of more technical end of admissions and so on. So thanks, Lucas.
Thank you, Delia. So for the application, it's already open. If you want to join us for the autumn 2024 intake, so that would be February 19th. That's when classes will start going. And then if you are a domestic student, the deadline for the application would be 28th of Jan 2024. If you are a international student, but then you are offshore, you will be the deadline would be 30th of November. And then international students, if you're onshore, it will be the 15th of December. We also do a recognition of prior learning, it will be submitted in a case-by-case basis. We also have financial support options if you are interested. Yeah, we also have CSP places on offer as well. So we will be opening up the question and answer forum right now. And if you are interested in asking any questions, please feel free to chuck it in the question and answer session at the bottom of the toolbar. We also noticed that Jenny, you put your hand up. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chuck it in the Q&A box so that we can address accordingly. All right, we have our first questions to ask. I will go to Andrew first. So Andrew, we have a lot of questions about how the class size is going to be and then the delivery methods. So in specifically would be, is there any other modules that would be delivered online?
The classes are all on campus in person. We do use a program called UTS Canvas, where we load up the lecture videos and certain exercises and reading. So there is you are using Canvas in these subjects, but the classes will be in person.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then continue with Andrew. What are the most critical skills and tools that students can expect and to gain upon completing this course? And how will this outcome prepare themselves into the future careers?
Okay. Well, in terms of writing. Writing and publishing students will be trained in the art of narrative and techniques like characterization, point of view, in structure, in the range of possibilities available to them in the field of creative nonfiction. These techniques are trained through exercises, through assessments, and students find that, in my experience, students have found that element, the technical side of these coursework subjects, to be really helpful for their book projects. And for example, Sydney Koo, they started that book in the UTS degree. They submitted it to the Write It Fellowship, which is a fellowship run by Penguin Random House, and where you work with editors on a project for a year, and Penguin Random House have an option to acquire that book. In Sydney's case, they did. Quite a few UTS students have won that fellowship over the years, while they've still been at UTS in their final year. Or this year, 2 UTS students won the Write It Fellowship. So there has been an interesting pathway for creative writing students at UTS just with Penguin Random House.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So I will quickly move to Amanda. So since you are a current student right now, based on your experience, what is the class size? Is it 1 to 20 or 1 to 30? How's the class size going?
Yeah, so they vary between, I'm in a class, one of my classes this semester was 6, there were 6 of us. But I think typically it's probably between 10 to 15 people. What I noticed, especially in the first semester, was the classes were quite full at first, maybe 20. And then within the first few weeks, people just disappeared. I'm not sure why. They definitely missed out, but anyway, yeah.
Well, fair enough. So you have the exclusive treatments in this course then. But then, yeah, well, we'll look into in the future, once you finish your degree, you will get into the industry of writing and publishing. David, you as the industry experts here, what are the most important skills for students to gain and they're required for jobs in the publishing field?
again, there's the broad range of everything. So, you can have computer skills, or you can have writing skills and editing skills. But I think one thing I'd like to reframe is that what UTS does is that this is a cultural industry, and you have to be able to be part of the cultural conversation. So we're talking about your writing and other people's writing, but what that actually does is make you engage, and then you can have a dialogue with people in the industry. Skills can be learned, but being able to have that conversation and actually understand, that helps you determine what you should be writing to hopefully go into the market, and also how you respond with people you're working with. And that's really the main thing. So you can call that a skill, but it's really more an engagement that you need to be able to talk with people who are active in the industry and think about these things. And that's really probably the strongest thing you could do to get in.
Fair enough. Well, of course, like studying and then like gaining all the knowledge and skills would be quite a difficult things to work on. Amanda, you as the current student right now, how do you kind of like juggle around with all the workload and like managing your work and study and life alongside with like gaining all the knowledge as well?
Yeah, it's pretty full on. So I think when I started, I came into the degree with a lot of enthusiasm, which I still have. But also, I had a full-time job, and I took on a full-time study loan. So I quickly realized that I was going to need to make some changes. So I reduced my hours down. Well, I reduced my days down to 4. And yeah, that seemed to really help. I think it was really within those first few weeks that once the assessment deadline started being spoken about, I realized that, I'd need to make those changes. And I think one of the things that I learned about managing all of it, especially thanks to Andrew, actually, was to, despite your major writing piece for a semester being due at the end of semester, it's really good to at least be thinking about the ideas from week 1 if you can. If you're anything like me, I feel really blocked when the pressure starts piling on. And so it's assessments, but it's, you still have to do weekly readings. There's a lot of reading. I hope everyone likes reading. If you're not, you will have to learn to like it. So yeah, there's a lot of reading. Sometimes, take home writing exercises, which at least in my experience have been ungraded. And I definitely spent way too much time on those. But yeah, it's basically trying to juggle all that. So trying to get ahead of the game at the beginning was definitely key. And yeah, just knowing like everyone has their own definition of what balance is. My social life became an abstract concept in semester 1. So I made the changes going into the second semester to balance it out to what suited me.
Fair enough. Well,
there's a question here from Eva Kumi. I'm interested in the grad cert because I've always had a love of language and books. I'm currently looking to change careers from primary school teaching to a career in editing and publishing. Do you think that publishing houses would value my professional background? Do you know any people who have come into editing and publishing from a teaching background? So a few things to sort of get out there. And I think it's important to my mind, if you're passionate about language and books, this is exactly the kind of degree that you would like.
Can I
and primary school teachers have such a sorry, Lucas?
No, I was just going to say there's actually a whole area of educational publishing, which is actually one of the most safest and profitable areas of publishing. So you can become a publishing expert in that area, especially if you have firsthand knowledge of kids and what levels they read at. A lot of people in publishing and even who are publishing kids' books don't have that direct knowledge. So you can take what you already got and then add publishing skills onto it and then work your way in, and that could actually be really beneficial.
Yes, and we've really formalised in this iteration of the degree, flexible skills and thinking about where to find opportunities for leadership. Sometimes that might be entrepreneurial. We've also spoken to the Small Press Network and a number of, a number of different stakeholders to think about, how to maximize, it's all about sort of, picking up different skills and, being ready to sort of, as David says, there's a great opportunity. What skills do I have? We help you sort of, for want of a better word, activate them, and then think and we're going to spend quite a bit of time in all the subjects, kind of thinking creatively and entrepreneurially about what you can do with the skills that you are acquiring.
I mean, I've known primary school teachers and high school teachers who have written novels, who have moved into academia, who work in publishing. The exact process for those career changes are complex, and there are lots of variables involved. But a big part of it is taking that step.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, guys, for all the expert knowledge and opinions here. David, as you also mentioned about like involvement and stuff in the publishing projects, could you also give us a little bit more examples on like what kind of projects they are?
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking. So like when I started, I did fall into reception, but I was actually doing my own projects. So I did self-publishing, publishing zines, anything you learn about how to make content and how to improve content and how to work with content creators will help you along the way. So I did that, and then we started a lit journal, and we did that, and we started an award. And so I didn't actually go to UTS, and I kind of wish that I had those skills rather than going the hard way. But if you can get involved with people and friends and stuff like that, and you do your projects, that's just such valuable experience, which you can then parlay into saying, I can now work on other people's projects. Yeah. I think that's answering your question, Lulu. Let me know.
Yeah, definitely. And then in terms of like example stuff, Andrew, can you also like provide an example of like practical learning experience or like projects that students at UTS have in the program to gain hands-on skills?
In terms of the publishing workshop subject?
Yeah, so gaining those hands-on skills, yeah.
Because I've just been working on some of those documents this week. Look, in the professional editing subject, students use real authentic documents to work with. So that is one example of the kind of learning that they will have. And so that's simulating, and then they simulate the copy editing process. And so by the end, they have good entry level skills in editing. In the new publishing subject, that is going to run so that students are, as I say, it's going to be like similar to an intern. It's an internship, an intern-like subject. And so that's where we are going to have someone come in from industry to brief students to talk about either a book that they have in production or a book that has just been produced. And students will be assigned into teams, and they will be working on the processes that each week and delivering reports. So there'll be online lectures. They download that knowledge. They have that before class. Then there'll be readings. Then they come into class ready to work on their role, and then reflect as a team on the particular process each week. And so they'll be building up experience in the different processes that are involved in producing a book. So, for example, writing a reader's report, analysing data, and then by the end of the degree, they reflect with our. We have a WIL team, work integrated learning team. They will come in and reflect with the students on the skills they've picked up, how to present them to industry, as well as the students presenting professional professional presentations, a whole package from all the work they've been doing over the semester to the industry person who came into class and briefed them at the beginning. So it is a very hands-on sort of industry. It also builds a relationship with the with industry. And of course, then there's also the UTS Writers Anthology, where students are working on from, that's not an official part of the course, but it is, one of the wonderful extracurricular activities that we have, where that journal is also produced from beginning to end. And David gives a lot of fabulous advice to the students and mentors them as they are producing that journal as well.
Yeah,
I hope that answers the question.
Lydia,
I mean, writing is inherently a project-based
Yes.
human endeavor. Books are extremely complex things in terms of projects, but even a short story that you submit for assessment at UTS is a involved iterative process that involves multiple drafts that we start discussing at story idea stage, that we workshop and then finally polish and submit for assessment. So
yes. Can I sorry, Andrew.
Yes. No, go on, Delia.
I was just going to pick up on there was a question in the Q&A on how we would normally deliver a class in the creative side of things as well, and you might like to talk about how you would run a class. I know that in the classes I teach in nonfiction, we tend to we don't just make students have a run at the work dry. We often simulate a number of different sorts of techniques, often techniques students haven't tried before, so they get to have a bit of a run with creative writing exercises in class, and then start to bring their work for their assignments into class. And so they might, a class might typically break into some writing exercises, discussion, and then increasingly as semester continues, guided workshopping, where students are critiquing each other's work and obviously getting expert input from the staff as well.
Well, Delia, any other extra tips or advice to people who want to study this degree and want to become a writer or editor or publisher in the future?
My advice would be, obviously, we always say this, to read. Follow different interests on social media, follow different publishers, look at what's out there in the marketplace, look at, where you think your interests and skills might fit. And then I think approaching publishing and writing with an open mind. So, my great pleasure as a teacher is a lot of my students haven't written nonfiction before, haven't thought of it, so I want to write a novel, I want to write a short story. And, it's wonderful when they come to class with an open mind, and, there we have, nonfiction books and all those articles being published. So I think flexibility is absolutely the key. Bring a flexible learning mindset to your degree, or any degree that you undertake.
Yeah. Amanda, Andrew, David, do you guys have anything do you want to add on as for advice?
In general, or in response to?
In response to for those who want to be a writer or editor.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously some questions around employability and what people are looking for, and so there are definite skills that you can learn. Try and learn Adobe. If you can be an editor who can typeset, there's a lot more jobs for you, whether in the industry or going solo. Definitely know Microsoft Word. If you're going anywhere in the sales and publicity direction, then you need to know how to do a database, run Excel, that kind of thing. But really, it's all attitude and being able to take feedback.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, David, Delia, Andrew, and Amanda, for all your amazing insights. So I got tons of requests from the Q&A session for me to reshare the fees requirements. So this part is basically the fees part. We do have the financial support options at UTS. Is available for Australian citizens and New Zealand special category visa holder as well as the humanitarian visa permanent resident as well. If you're UTS alumni, you can also enjoy a 10% off with the non-CSP fee-paying courses. And you also have like a plenty of UTS scholarship available as well. Yeah. So with that discussion coming to an end, we have like finalized and conclude our session. I would like to extend my gratitude to our guest speakers, Delia, Amanda, David, and Andrew for coming in today, for sharing their invaluable insights into the dynamic landscape of like writing, editing, and publishing industry. And for this opportunities, if you have any other questions that you want to ask, please feel free to also book a one-on-one consultation session with our team. Or if you want to, you can email us via fass.marketing@uts.edu.au. And we look forward to supporting your learning journey at UTS. And for those interested in applying, applications are now open for the February 19th, 2024 intake. You can also submit your application via the UTS student portal, and we appreciate your participation in this webinar, and we hope to see and welcome you at UTS very, very soon. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.